Okay, welcome everybody. We are back with our review of episode 6, season 2 of Snowpiercer. I might even go as far to say as the best episode of Snowpiercer out of all of them. I'm not too sure. It would be good to discuss it today. I was really, really happy with the episode. If you have not liked and subscribed, make sure you do that. But before we get into it, Dan, you're doing something else on your account, right? You seem to think
Yeah,
people want your opinion about stuff.
yeah, that's correct. Um, so yeah, I just basically I said at the beginning of the year that I was going to be doing a podcast, and then didn't really hold up my end of the bargain. But I rededicated myself. I'm calling it a Bird in the Hand podcast, just to play off my last name, Finch. It's going to be a long form podcast once a week. I'll probably release that on Mondays or Tuesdays. Like you said, I seem to think people care about my opinion about things. And
No, but
then,
it's quite interesting. I listened to that first episode, ranting about the Oscars and things, which is you made some good points. So
yeah, I mean, especially this year, I didn't know what to watch until they told me what to watch, you know. But yeah, and then I'll just do some short clips. I'm gonna try and keep it a little bit funnier than the first episode was. But yeah, this is sort of based a little bit off of Bill Burr. If you've ever listened to his podcast, he just kind of rants a little bit, talks. It's a great way if you've never done it, and you don't have enough money for a psychologist to just talk and get things out. And if you just put it out there, hey, you never know, somebody might actually find it, interesting and might take something home from it. So yeah, take a look at that and hit the like and subscribe. I will also be posting our YouTube video that we currently are doing right now on the same channel. All right.
and guys who are watching it on my account, I'll put a link to Dan's profile, Dan's YouTube profile in the comments, so you can make sure you give him a follow for sure. So let's get into this episode. I knew I was wrong straight away before I even watched the episode because I went on Netflix and it said many miles from Snowpiercer. That's the title of the episode. And I thought, God damn it. Like, just completely wrong.
So not only was I right about this episode, right, but if we go back 2 weeks to what my prediction was in the flashbacks, I was also right about that. So it's taken a really long time in coming, but finally, I have made a couple of correct predictions.
But what did you think? Like I said at the top of the show, I actually loved the episode, really loved it, and I really think it's one of the best ones they've done. How did you feel about it?
So, as I always do, I watch it pretty much the night that it comes out, and usually I watch it while doing something else, usually while on a run or something or while I'm tidying up. And then before we do the episode, I watch it and I write all my notes. So that way it's fresh in my mind, and I can pick up on some things. So going into today's watching of it, I was like, what are we going to talk about? I'm not really sure there's going to be a lot to talk about. She's basically off of Melanie. It's basically off of the train. And like, I think, I know there's flashbacks, but there's not going to be too many talking points. I took more notes on this episode than I've taken on any other episode. And that's not just because I was looking for notes, but because there's a lot to it. And there's aspects of this episode that they just haven't, included in other things. The visuals, the scenes, the delving into her character. There was so much more. It was such a more well-rounded. It might not be my most favorite episode of all time, but I think it is probably their best produced episode of all time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I do agree with you on a lot of what you said.
So the basic story of the episode, before we go into the finer details, is there is no action happening on Snowpiercer in this episode, save for a couple of flashbacks that Melanie has, and the whole episode is Melanie at the research station in the Rocky Mountains, while getting there and then being there, and then we'll get to the ending a little bit later. She's there for the whole episode, and let's just go back. Can you remind the viewers why she's at the research station?
Yeah, so basically, she's noticed that the CR7, I want to call it CR7, but that's Cristiano Ronaldo 7. Yeah, right.
Can you hear me? 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 Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna try to. I don't want to work with the headphones. All right.
Okay.
Sorry about that, folks. A little technical piece. I will cut that out. Um. So yeah. So she's out. She moves to the research station. She notices that the cooling technology or the element shot into the air due to global warming is falling. She thought it was snow. They did some research on it, realized that basically whatever element it is that they shot out into the atmosphere is falling, and therefore the Earth is warming back up again. So she is out there at the research station to take a look, see what she can gather, what sort of information she can gather about that.
And then, so she's on her way from Snowpiercer to the research station. She's on the snow sled, the motorized sled, and it breaks down. Or it gets stuck, right? It gets stuck.
I think it gets stuck, breaks down, potato, whichever way you look at it, it doesn't work. I'm going to try this one.
Or she ends up walking the last mile or something.
All right, that's better. All right. So she ends up walking the last mile. She gets there. She does a little, just a little housekeeping, moving dead bodies out of the way.
Right. So the first thing she sees someone lying in the snow with a hole in his temple.
Yes. And then she goes inside, and there's the guy in the rolling chair in front of the monitor who's frozen to death.
It's the woman, right?
Woman.
Who slit her wrist. No, she slit her wrist.
Yep. Slit her wrist. And so there's obvious wreckage of dead people.
Find an arm in the fridge.
I mean, yeah, she's looking for rations. She lays out her rations. She doesn't have too many rations. It's a whole housekeeping thing.
Right, because there was an avalanche. I wasn't sure, and then she kind of, I wasn't too sure of that until she mentioned it later.
Best moment of the episode for me. The only gaffe in the episode was when they show that avalanche and they sort of zoom out of it. It's right before commercial break for me, and I just sort of caught a glacial lake at the top of it. So there's water, but there's not really water. You know what I mean? So yeah, so she gets there. She does her little housekeeping thing. She's trying to figure out. She looks in the fridge. She finds an arm. And
she only has enough. She only has one ration pack, which is usually going to last you like a week, right?
I thought they said a month. Yeah, I think like she figured out that it could last a month if she had rationed it properly, basically.
But that was going to be cut. No, I don't even think she had enough for that, because I think even when she has one of those kind of conversations with Wilford, he's like, it's never going to last a month.
Right. I thought you thought it was going to last a month. Imagine if it has to last.
Well, I think she did. I think she kind of portioned it out,
Right. But it was just going to be difficult.
5 and stuff. Yeah.
So let's just start digging into something. So the first thing that I thought, and I'm going to touch on, I'm going to touch on this first. So, is there anything she can't do? Because
that is a good point.
Right. I wrote down. Is Melody the smartest human being ever? Right, because she can program it. She's the right. She catches the rats. You watch her, and it was actually literally.
She's an engineer. Like any engineer could kind of like come up with some contraption to do that.
Right, but it was the scene where she breaks into the geothermal vent, which we'll get to in a minute. And all the rest of it, where she's taking down the wall and she's cutting everything down and all the rest of it. Well, I'm just like, geez, this woman can freaking do anything. She can hike out to the station by herself. She can program the train. She can govern the train for 7 revolutions or whatever it was. There's nothing that she can't do. She is a superhero character, which makes sense because it's like a graphic novel, right? So I guess she is the superhero character in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good kind of get out clause for any writer to have one character who can just basically do anything.
There's always like the debate, like who's the strongest superhero or whatever else. And then somebody always comes in and, I'm not too much of a nerd that I've read these articles and I actually know this, but I'm enough of a nerd that I casually know this, where somebody will just be like, well, this character in this book was given all the godlike qualities, and you're like, I've never even read that book, like, and I would never have even noticed. That's her. She can do everything.
Well, it's interesting because people actually get bored. Like, people have got really bored of Superman because he's too strong. Like, he has no flaw. I mean, yeah, kryptonite is like incredibly rare stone, but like he's incredibly, like, he's just, there's no flaws to him, so it's too easy for him.
Her flaw is it would prior to this have been her inability to feel, but we see that that's not really true either in this episode.
Well, I think we will see in future episodes the weakness. What the weakness is, her feelings for her daughter, and I'm sure that'll be played on as we go. But who knows? I mean, we'll get to the end, but I don't know what the hell to predict. It's good,
incredible. So
let's get into the science a little bit, though. Because Melanie doesn't have enough food and she is gonna be starving to death, but she finds that some food's being stolen, and it's kind of portrayed that, okay, maybe she's hallucinating this and imagining it because we've got all these flashbacks and all these conversations she's having with Wilford and with Leighton and people like this, and she finds a rat.
Right, she sets up a trap. Going on this, I just want to say that they do a really good job of bringing the right person that she hallucinates in each circumstance. So whenever she has, like, for the most part, it's Wilford. And then when she's going to go catch the rat, it's Leighton, because he's sitting there going like, oh, Taylor would have been really proud of that trap. And I thought that was a really, that was really skillfully done. So she has her biscuit, which she leaves out, and she falls asleep, and she wakes up and it's gone, and she has this debate with the imaginary Wilford where he's like, you could have, she says, I could have eaten it, and he goes, or you could be hallucinating, you could be going crazy, and she goes, or maybe I
quite liked how Wilford was kind of, highlighting the virtues of suicide and the nobleness of it at some point.
Yep. Also, when he was talking about the cutting down the wrist and all the rest of it, and I was just I wonder what that relates to. Also, he's smoking all the time.
Yeah.
Constantly, even when she's imagining him, he's smoking weed.
I don't know if that has any kind of... I don't know if that actually has any meaning. I thought it was just adding to his kind of the coolness of his character. Right. For example... One thing I've been going through quite recently is watching like French New Wave cinema. And if you ever watch like French 60s, 70s New Wave cinema, some of the, there's one actor who's in quite a lot of them, and, he just smokes continuously through the whole movie, and he's got this kind of like cool personality about him. And I think it might just be adding to it like that, just like any cowboy used to smoke all the time in all westerns.
I wasn't so much looking too much into it. I just find it amusing that he is, even in her state of things, she is imagining him as smoking a nice big fat joint at all times. So she sets up a nice trap for the rat, and she uses part of what's left of her very precious rations, and she traps the rat. And
no, she cuts a bit of arm off. No,
does she?
Yeah, she cuts in the snow.
Right. She cuts it. Yeah, you're right. I literally just watched that, and I forgot that.
And then she follows the rat, and the rat goes through a hole.
Well, she catches the rat, and she goes back there, and she imagines Leighton again, and Leighton grabs the rat, and he just goes, well, he looks delicious. I've got a great recipe. No, sorry, I've got a great recipe for him. So then she dips the rat in some sort of formula. I mean, it was like alcohol and something. Obviously a paint-like mixture, and she follows the rat back to a wall, and she gets into the wall, and she finds a geothermal vent where there are many rats, and there is some form of vegetation.
Yeah. I can't imagine what that'd be.
Right. But they're still icicles. Right, so it's still cold. It's a very strange thing because there's steam.
But it's humid, like it's super humid at least.
It's a very strange, like that. That's the only part of this episode that I was really like, I'm confused by this a little bit, because it was steamy, it was humid, there was vegetation, but from the ceiling there were still icicles, unless those are stalactites. which they might be, but that's well beyond my,
Right.
whatever. I'm reading into that maybe a little too much. So, just quick question. She was there for, almost the better part of a whole year, correct?
No.
Yes. But at the end of the episode,
Yeah.
right, Snowpiercer comes all the way back around. Oh no!
No, because they did that weird loop. No, she was there like 30.
Yeah.
She was there like 33 days because like day 28.
Right.
I mean, by the time she's found the rat, and it's quite funny because like the rest of the episode, apart from flashbacks, is like wake up, wipe the snow off the solar panels, eat a rat, go to sleep, and it's just like that.
How many rats has she eaten?
Oh, she better save. She's probably gonna need them. And then she has lost contact with Snowpiercer because the electronics messed up, right? And the tower fell down, and that links within the last episode on Snowpiercer where they lost contact with Melanie, and so.
But didn't they lose contact with her on like the third or fourth balloon, or am I like going crazy? Because I wrote that like I was trying to figure out the timeline of everything, and like I felt like they said she didn't connect on like the fourth balloon, but
right. I thought it was like the 11th balloon on the episode we just watched.
On the episode we just watched, it was like the 11th balloon, and that sort of didn't make any sense to me. I was trying to figure out the timeline, and I obviously didn't have time to go back and search through the previous episode to try and figure out what it was.
Right. So she kind of loses contact with them, and then she's trying to get radio, and then what's it? It's like day 33. And she hears a noise, like his vibrating noise.
She feels it. She feels Snowpiercer.
Which I guess does make sense. I mean, if nothing else on the planet is moving.
And she's only, like a mile off the track, it seems. I mean, it doesn't seem like she's that far off the track. Yeah, true. Because regardless of which way you look at it, it's 1,034 cars, and she felt it, which means that it would have been very close by, and she was able to suit up and walk out to it and still get to it while it was still on the track. So it couldn't have, she can't have been that far off the tracks. Now I'm reading a little bit too much into the show. But yeah, it's, that she feels Snowpiercer. She goes out and she's trying to radio them through whatever communication device she has in her mask and her suit or whatever, and she fails to communicate with them, and they fail to stop for her.
Right. So, which begs the question: which begs the question, what the hell is going on Snowpiercer? Right.
Exactly. So they really tie in the next episode. They're just like, wait until next week to see how this all ties together.
Well, what do you think the hell is going on Snowpiercer? I mean, I can't think of anything other than Wilford has taken over, because I can't see anybody else not stopping for her.
So, I think there's going to be a little bit of a revolution next episode, but I don't necessarily think that it's Wilford based. I think it's going to be Leighton based. I'm going to go all the way back to that one, and I think that disrupts things enough that it may distract Ben, or quite possibly the communication with, they're paying too much attention to the communication with Audrey, and that somehow they've screwed up the communication box.
Do you think the next episode is going to end basically where this episode ended, but we're just going to take next episode is going to be like what happened during Snowpiercer during this time when Melanie,
Yeah, I think probably 100%. I think that seems like a good way to do it. I literally wrote next episode, fill in the timeline. And what I meant by that was the timeline while she was away. Not like, just random timelines.
Because we got that scene of Alex, because they got that big window at the back of Big Alice, right? And Alex looks fairly desperate.
Yeah, I find it. I don't think that. I understand what you're saying, but for some reason, part of me is just like I don't think that Wilfred's taken over yet, and I don't think he will take over it. I think. That would be too much, too quick, too fast in one episode. So unless like they do two episode arc where Wilfred starts a revolution and they sort of take over, and then. It's not next episode, but the episode after that.
I agree with you. It's just I can't think of any other I mean, save for a mechanical problem, because,
Right.
who's running Snowpiercer? Well, there's Ben, there's
So
Ruth, there's Leighton, and they're all kind of fairly
so
amenable, or even more so, to Melanie.
that's where that communication box, that's the only thing that I can think of that might tie everything together, that Audrey is trying to break into, so that way they can listen to Wilford, right? So
Mm-hmm.
my theory, and you're gonna have to stick with this because this is gonna be the boldest, but I've been emboldened by getting this prediction right, and this is gonna be the boldest thing that I've said so far. I think that somehow Wilford cuts communication on the train based off the fact that he knows that Audrey is attempting to, help Ben and all of them listen in.
Mm-hmm.
When he does that, I think somehow Leighton has to be, help out and get everything pieced back together. But to go back to everything we've been talking about for the last couple episodes, I think he starts losing power. And while he's trying to help put the communication back together, revolution breaks out against him. Whew.
I don't know if they're going to get through all of that in the next episode. This is going to be like a slow arc.
That's a quick one. That's like a scene. That's just like literally one cut scene before a commercial. That is my bold prediction for the next episode. Whichever way you look at it, I think that Leighton goes down. That's my
okay. No, I think Leighton's going to survive. I think Leighton's.
I think he'll
survive the job.
I think he'll survive, but I think we see next episode that he's on his way down. I want to get into some other things because we've done a good job of telling them everything that's happened in this episode, but there's a lot to sort of dig into, like the scene. So I said that they did a lot of good stuff with the scene. So one of my favorite scenes is when the flashback in the night car. Melanie comes into the night car, and if you notice, he's up on the balcony, right? So she's below him. And then they have a conversation about geneticists and order and having, I think he calls them jack straps.
Jack boots.
Jack boots, there you go. And she says, I want 12 geneticists, or 6 geneticists, and then their immediate family, so 12. And he says, no, you can have 6. And that the scene ends once again with him up on the balcony and her below him. So it's like it was a really good way of sort of cinematography of them saying you're below him at the beginning of the scene, you have the conversation, you get put in your place, and you end the scene below him. And it's little things like that I really enjoyed about this episode. That was one of my favorite scenes.
One thing I found was strange was that when the train, because we should talk about it, there's the other flashback where the train leaves. Right, and they
kill the geneticists and all the rest of it.
Right, they kill the geneticists, and there's lots of people kind of people who some of them become tailies, right, because they kind of board the train.
Right.
And Wilford's on the train like a few minutes before the train leaves.
Yeah,
and then leaves. And the one thing that really annoyed me was he's kind of outside when the train's moving, still pretty slowly, like
on a Jeep.
But he could have got on the train. Yeah. Like we saw that episode when Melanie was outside, and then she runs like LeBron James chasing down Iguodala to get on the train, and like Wilford can't get on when it's going like so slowly.
I wrote down Wilford off train for like 2 minutes with like 7 question marks. That was my point on that one. Like I don't understand. Like he literally gets off the train, he calls the guy for the Jeep, and then they get off. So he's even on a motorized vehicle. Like he could have just driven alongside, pulled a Vin Diesel, too fast, too furious.
You know how slow a 10-mile train is starting?
Right? Yeah, I know. And it just didn't make sense to me at all. Like I'm timelines are a little bit off for me on this, in this episode. And that definitely did bother me.
Another thing I worry.
Also, when he just goes, we need, 6 more jackboots, and then he just kills the geneticist. It's like, well, you guys are already here. Your security's already here. Like, where are you shipping them in from? Like, what's, like you guys are dealing with the revolution. Like, I didn't quite get that. Although I have to say, they did a good job of making him look good young. So like, more chiseled. He's a little bit less weary. All the rest of it. I'm a little bit more attracted to young Wilford. I've got to say.
Did they do that much work? I thought he looked like the same.
Well, you see, you don't notice good-looking men the way that I
Clearly not. So
do. Also, just they keep adding to his his vindictive ruthlessness.
right.
Gutting down those geneticists in cold blood the way that he did. I mean, first off, this is on basic cable TV, so to speak, here in the U.S. It is a very risque show for basic cable TV, which I continually am reminded about. And find pretty incredible. With the suicides that we've had this season, and then watching 12 people get gunned down in cold blood like that. It's very interesting to me that this is something that's just on TNT and not behind a paywall on HBO.
Oh, I mean, we're so like desensitized to violence nowadays in today's society. It's just compared to 40 years ago. It's just kids watch everything nowadays.
So one of the things that stuck out to me as well, and I wrote down, so Wilford kind of reminds me of government.
Mm-hmm.
And Melanie kind of reminds me of humanity, even though she doesn't have the feelings of humanity. Like, she is looking out for, the world continuing. And what I mean by humanity is sort of more like she's almost the voice of the people. Like, we need to, logical. Like, we all think that we're thinking about the best. We don't consider everybody. Whereas Wilford considers what is best in order for the world to succeed. So, the geneticist, she thinks like, okay, so this is what we need in the future. And he's looking at it like, well, we don't even know if there's going to be a future. We just know that we need order on the train. And it ties into, especially, obviously we all know what's going on with politics in the whole world these days, where, everybody thinks that they're right, but like and we all assume that politicians just have their own means in mind, when in reality, like, to be a politician, the be all and end all is like, you're really thinking about the people. You make decisions based off what you think is right for the people for the most part. I know it's so easy these days to criticize that, but I think that that's just because, we're so able to formulate our opinions so freely now that it's so easy to question everybody. But if you're put into the same situation, then you realize that there are sacrifices that you have to make just so that way, the world can run the way that the world runs.
Well, in a sense, like with Snowpiercer departing, tough decisions have to be made, and
Yeah.
and we even see Melanie's tough decision of leaving without a daughter.
Well, her daughter, and I think her mom and dad, if I remember correctly from previous episodes. Right?
Yeah. Do you think Wilford played a part in that? Was he holding them to one side as a kind of guarantee to keep her in check? And
sure. Yeah. I think
Melanie's probably not realized that. But one thing I do think is, like, the more we see of Wilford, especially with flashbacks and things, is like how ridiculous this idea is that he just was always in the engine on the train. Like, I mean, he's somebody who kind of wants to be the center of attention,
right.
And he's always building his public persona, and it seems ridiculous that no one really questioned this for 7 years until Layton came along.
I think you could go full QAnon here and just kind of go like, well, isn't that what the world is, until Donald Trump became president, and then he opened our eyes to the fact that there really is this deep state, and all the rest of it. So like, you could look at it like that. I mean, like, to be a little conspiratorial, like, I think that a lot of people think that way about the world. Like, you really think that the president is the guy that runs everything? You really think that the prime minister is the guy that runs everything? It's obviously not. It's this George Soros guy, and it's this, it's the Clinton Foundation. I'm obviously speaking.
Save this for your other podcast.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, it's almost like that.
Right. Yeah.
So, I touched before about her hallucinations and how each one of them match up appropriately. So the thing that I found most interesting was that she never reads the logs at the station. Physically, you never watch her reading the logs. Obviously, she's hallucinating. So in order for that information to get in and for her to have a conversation with Wilford, she needs to have read them. But in the scenes, he's just sitting back, smoking, reading these logs and having a conversation with her like, oh, well, she felt this way, and she lasted for 5 more months after he took the bullet to the head and all the rest of it. And once again, going back to the cinema, she never actually sits down. You never actually visibly see her read them, which I thought was also a fairly interesting thing that they did in the episode.
Yeah, but then, they generally skip fairly boring bits. It's why if you watch Friends, you never see any of them like do their own laundry or something like that, because it's boring task that just everyone has to do.
I just, it's like I said, this is the best put together episode that they've had. So things like that were what sort of led to it.
Do you think what's going to happen let's do some predictions for Melanie. I think we both agreed next episode is going to be like a Snowpiercer heavy episode and filling in the blanks of the last kind of 2-3 weeks that we're missing. What's going to happen to Melanie?
Well, I mean, she survived. She's going to survive until somehow there's communication made. That's going to be like season finale.
How are they going to get it back? Are they going to stop the train and turn it and put it in reverse? Or are they going to do another lap?
They're going to go around again. They're definitely going to do another lap. There's going to be, my prediction is that there will be a struggle between Wilford and his cronies, so to speak, and then everybody else about whether or not they're just going to go back to doing revolutions or whether they're going to do that loop. And I think that'll be a struggle that comes up in the next few episodes. I see her playing less of a role for the rest of the season, but also I'm not sure she goes back to the train. I think maybe there's the train can stop at some point and then Alex gets off or maybe a couple of people. I think, she'll make contact with the train. Maybe they do a little loop with her and then they send a party back out. It might be like her and Ben and, Alex and, maybe the Australian woman.
Yeah, just get bloody Miles driving the train. I mean, he's been trained up. We've not seen him for ages. He's been doing his training, so maybe he can start driving the train.
He's been featuring in other Hollywood things somewhere.
Oh, really? Has he?
I have no idea. I genuinely have not a clue.
Oh, I thought you did the Oscars podcast, I
thought. No, not at all. So I think we see less of her as the season goes on. This was, you can't have too many of these episodes because you need to appreciate, film in order to enjoy.
I really loved seeing the Chief Jackboot again, the Scottish guy.
Yeah. Out that big scar over his eye.
Yeah, it was cool seeing him.
Yeah,
and it was cool seeing Leighton get on the train as well. I quite like that scene.
Looking good too, not looking like a tailie, not clean shaven, but shaved down properly, shorter hair. Like you kind of see him and I'm like, look at you looking like a human. Yeah. So, I see her arc coming around and somehow, I think, her and Alex are going to get reunited. Like, let's be realistic. Like they're not playing up on this relationship that much. And then Alex dies or she dies or something like that. Somehow they're reunited. Season 3 is going to be a lot of their relationship or something like that if they make a season 3. Obviously, our podcast is adding to the popularity of the show. And because
the lore of the show. Yeah.
Because of that, they will be able to make a season 3. So it's because of us.
I mean, people are watching it, though. It's always kind of top 5 on Netflix in France. So it's got to be the same in most countries as well, I'd imagine.
I would imagine. Well, I haven't looked at any. Not that I understand how the ratings system works and all the rest of it, but I can't imagine that it's particularly massively watched here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
It's on at 9:00 on a Monday night on TNT. It's not a primetime slot. It may be leading Monday night.
Yeah, but what else are you doing on Monday nights, Especially Monday Night Football's not on, so...
That's true. No, I understand all of that. I'll take a look at all the numbers, and I'll report back to the group next week.
Sounds good. We'll put up a balloon and make contact with you.
So what's your predictions? Because I think I've spoken enough about mine for next episode, and we all know that now that I'm on a little bit of a winning streak, I'm going to be right next week. So I'm not even sure.
Yeah, but that's a bad thing. You're like that player who makes a 3 and then it's like, okay, now I've got a blank check for the rest of the night. I don't know, J.R. Smith, and you make 1-3, and then you'll go 1 for 20.
I was listening to Julius Randle on JJ Redick's podcast, and they were talking about Kobe Bryant's last game, and JJ Redick was like, I mean, it's pretty special. He scored 64 points, but then I looked at the box score before the podcast. He shot the ball 57 times, something like that. That's me.
Kobe Bryant, right here. Next week is definitely going to be a Snowpiercer episode. I think Wilford has taken over the train. That's my bold prediction. This is Joe Namath calling the Super Bowl beforehand as a 10-point underdog. So my big prediction, Wilford has taken over Snowpiercer.
Okay. I like it. We both have some pretty bold predictions.
We've got some.
Mine's very specific. Yours is bold. I like it. So tune in next week to see who's right, or more specifically, whether both of us are wrong.
Take care, everybody. Have a good week. See you next week.